Now, my next guest tonight, he's a bit of a mysterious character, having become the youngest person ever to get 3 Michelin stars. He then handed them back and he hasn't cooked since. But he's a hugely successful restaurateur who's just opened his second restaurant in Dublin. Please welcome Marco Pierre White. Marco, it's great to see you again. Welcome back to the show.
It's nice to be here.
Now, I was thinking about you, and I was thinking that... we've had a lot of the well-known British chefs have come here, right? Gary Rhodes came here, couldn't hack it in Ireland. Ramsay came here, down to Powers Court, couldn't hack it in Ireland. John Christophe Novelli came here, couldn't hack it in Ireland. The only two who have lasted here have been you and, so far, Jamie Oliver. So, what's the secret?
That's a really tough question. I thought you were going to be nice to me. I remember, it was, I don't know, 6 years ago, I met up with the Fitzpatricks and they wanted to do something in Dawson Street. And I thought about it and I said, what I think we should do is a steakhouse. I'm a Yorkshire boy and I came from very humble beginnings. And the people of Ireland remind me of the people from the world that I came from. Very down to earth, very honest, very straightforward, very black and white. And I think, you know, it's all about honesty on a plate. It's not about trying to kid people. It's not about fluff. It's not about a veneer. It's about honesty. Because I'm no different to anybody in this room. When I get my plate of food, if it costs me 20 euros or 15 euros or 10 euros, I want to see value on my plate. It's as simple as that. And I think one thing I've always done when I've come to Ireland is be very honest with everyone I've ever sat with. And I've got to say that no place on this earth has ever shown me kindness or respect and opened their arms like the Irish people.
Really?
And that is the God's honest truth. And I'm not saying that because I'm sitting with you, Brendan, and the audience to my left.
I believe you. Yeah.
I'm glad you believe me. I wouldn't want to get into a discussion.
Yeah.
But I think it's all about honesty.
Yeah.
When I walk the streets of Dublin, the emotional impact on me is like walking through the streets of Leeds. It's very honest, it's very straightforward. It's not about fluff. Yeah. And if you look at the businesses that do well in Ireland, they're really honest.
You give us our dinner, basically. That's what we like.
And then I gave you the bill.
Yeah.
It's two-dimensional.
Is that down to earth thing? Is that in a way why you walked away from the whole Michelin thing? Was that a rejection of the kind of the grand cuisine and the, you know, classical tricky French notions of cooking and all that?
I started cooking in the 70s. The old world. It was Escoffier's world. Chefs weren't famous. Michelin had just arrived in Great Britain. And the boys and girls who tended to walk into kitchens were from very humble beginnings. They were from a working class world. And you went to work and you did your job. You know, sometimes you'd work 20 days straight. You never questioned it. You were taught to say, yes, chef. You just did your job, kept your head down. And I fell in love with my industry. I was very fortunate that I got a job at the Box Tree in Ilkley in West Yorkshire, which had 2 stars in Michelin, one of only 4 restaurants in Britain. And the 2 owners were very special. They used to tell me about the great French restaurants, Maxime's, La Serre, La Tour d'Argent, La Grande Fifort. It was like Jack Hanori in it. You know, it was extraordinary. I used to absorb every word they said. And every alternate weekend, they'd go to France and they'd dine in these great restaurants. And they'd come back and they'd tell the chef, Michael Lawson, who was an extraordinary man, God bless his soul, he's not with us now. And they'd tell him exactly what they had in intricate detail, and he would replicate it for their dinner on Tuesday. They'd tell him how to correct it. By Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, it was on the menu, an exact replica of what they'd eaten.
So I'm not sensing huge creativity or connection with the...
It wasn't about that, because the world of gastronomy wasn't about creativity. Escoffier had written the repertoire. So all restaurants in the 70s, all those great restaurants, give or take, it was the same menu. That happened afterwards. We then found La Cuisine Nouvelle. But classical cuisine was the foundation. If you look at the great restaurants of France today, their foundation is still based on classicism. You can't reinvent the wheel. We live in a world of refinement, not invention. And so what these boys did, the creativity was going to France, going to those great restaurants and bringing back those great ideas and that refinement back to Yorkshire and serving on their plates to the customers. That was the genius. But what it did for me was it gave me great insight into that world. And that's what inspired me. And then they told me about restaurants like La Gare Roche and La Tonteclair. And then one day I had that great
And did you fall out of love with those notions at some point?
I was going back to the question. I forgot about that. You know, I like to digress.
It's okay.
What happened was so I studied in the old world and I saw the modern world and I saw that golden age of gastronomy. And winning 3 stars, without question, is the most exciting journey of any young chef's life.
Yeah.
But when you win your 3 stars, it becomes very systematic.
Yeah.
You're a well-oiled machine. People are coming to your restaurant for those specialities, and you have to be consistent. When you think in the late 90s, we were £300 a head, including wine.
Wow.
We were generous.
Yeah.
That was a lot of money, but it was so boring. And then I started to think, do I want to do this anymore? I'd leave home early morning, and my 2 sons are sleeping. I'd come home every night, and they're sleeping 6 days a week. The only time I really saw them was on a Sunday, or when they sat on the pass when their mother would bring them to say hello to me for a cup of coffee just before lunch service. Yeah. And so I started to question everything. I wasn't enjoying doing it anymore because the creativity had gone. We were a slick machine. And I thought to myself, I've really got 3 options. My first option was to continue doing what I'm doing, 6 days a week, 80 to 90 hours a week, being behind my stove. That's where I belonged, because I believe you're going to charge high prices, you have 3 stars in Michelin, you've got to be behind your stove. That's what I believed. My second option was to live a lie, to pretend I cook when I don't cook, continue to charge high prices, question my own integrity and everything that I've ever worked for.
Gordon Ramsay you're describing here, yes?
I'm just giving you a little bit of clarity.
Okay.
To your question, Brendan.
Okay.
My third option was pluck up the courage, let the Michelin know that on the 23rd of December 1999 that I will be hanging up my apron and retiring. They were my 3 options. One day, I was on the riverbank one Sunday afternoon, and this little thought came into my head. And that thought was, Marco, you're being judged by people who have less knowledge than you. So I thought to myself, so what's it all worth? What have I worked all these years for? And it was that that gave me the courage and the strength to hang up my apron and accept that tomorrow morning I've lost my status and I'm unemployed. It was as simple as that, and I became rather lost after that, and I wandered off to the countryside and I did all the things I did as a child. I went fishing, I went shooting, but I had to discover myself, and about 5 years after that I came back to London and I sort of semi-discovered myself, because when you work in a kitchen like I did, and all your energy goes into the food and into your restaurant, your emotional growth is limited, because all your emotions are going into your food, into your restaurant. And so therefore, when I left the kitchen at 38 years old, my emotional growth was minimal, my spiritual growth was minimal. I was quite socially inept, I was scared of the outside world. I'd been institutionalized within the world that I'd been brought up in.
I wonder, had you, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I wonder, had you gone into that kind of quite safe, obsessive world where nothing could touch you, because, and it's well documented that the defining event in your life is that when you were 6 years old, your mother collapsed in front of you and subsequently died, and that it had a huge impact on you. Is that why you ran away into kitchens and obsession and everything?
Well, I think firstly I mean, the most defining moment of my life was the day my mother died. And like I'm sitting with you now, I watched my mother die. And my father was a very hard man. And so when my mother died, my father gave me and my brothers one possession of our mother's and then never mentioned her again.
Oh.
Mine was my mother's Bible. And my father was a chef, my grandfather was a chef. And so I followed my father's footsteps. So from the age of 6 to 16, my father programmed me to be like he was. I came from the working class world of Leeds, the industrial north, very hard. He prepared me for that tough kitchen life, because in those days, kitchens were far tougher and far harder than they are today. So I left and I went into these tough kitchens, and for the next sort of 8 years of my life, I'd been prepared for that. So that world was quite comfortable for me.
Because you didn't need to have an emotional existence, so you could shut down because of that terrible
I hid
trauma
within that world.
Yeah.
Working hard was the greatest painkiller I could ever have taken. What happened was it suppressed my internal pain. And I'm not doing a very good job of expressing myself. Can I have an empty glass and I'll give you a little metaphor. Thank you. I've never, and this helped me a lot in my life, and I've shared this with a few friends in my life. And I believe there's really two species of human beings. The first species is the most common. There's more of them. They're individuals, like we all, we're born into a certain world. And we become a product of that world. We absorb that environment we're born into. We've become an extension of it. We've become part of it. We've absorbed it. We're a product of that world. The rarest species, in my opinion, is the individual who has been damaged as a child. They've suffered misfortune and great tragedy. This doesn't mean they're better people. It just means that they've suffered misfortune and great tragedy. And very few individuals suffer that tragedy. But what happens when you watch your mother die, like I did? An invisible shell covers you. It protects you. So you don't absorb the world you're born into. You don't become part of that world because you're inside the glass. But you observe that world. But the glass is there to preserve you, protect you, and you grow within it. And then there comes a point in your life when you have to break the glass to allow your emotional and spiritual growth to continue. If you don't, you suffocate within the glass. The internal pain, which has been with you for years, stays with you.
And have you successfully broken out of the glass?
When I was 31 years old, I was in my kitchen. And this voice came in my head. Marco, who is your mother? Marco, who is your mother? And I tried to dismiss it. Like everything in my life, I'd pushed through. I'd suppressed the emotional pain. I just kept on pushing. But on this day, I couldn't push away. He kept on coming back, Marco, who is your mother? Marco, who is your mother? Who is your mother, Marco? And so I said to my right-hand man, I said, Robert, take over. I have to make a phone call. I went to my office and I picked up my phone to call my father and have that conversation with him, who was my mother. But I put the phone back down and I thought, totally illogical. All he's going to say is that my mother was a wonderful person. I know that. I remember those 6 years of my life. She made my blueprint. So I picked up the phone to call my mother's sister, my mother's brother. I thought, illogical. So I put the phone down. And the only logical approach I felt to find a solution and an answer to my question was to write down every single memory I had of my mother. I write down every memory of my mother, and then I start to dissect them like dissecting a dish, craving understanding. And at the end of it, what I realised was not who I was, not who my mother was, sorry, but who I was. I was my mother's son. What had happened from the age of 6 to 16, that my father had programmed me to be like he was. But I wasn't that person, but it assisted me getting me to where I got. So from the age of 31 to where I am today, I've walked down that road of self-discovery. And that's what's important to me.
Marco, I have to say, this is one interview I would never attend. I hope that we can continue this conversation sometime. We're kind of out of time now. That's remarkable insight. We should say to people as well that you have a new restaurant in Donnybrook and they can go there and get a very nice steak and chips. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Marco Pierre White.
Thank you very much.